systems go. Big way to come back from the holiday break, I think, to make the bold move of doing a live video for this. Hey, I'm glad whoever is here to join us, whoever ends up making it on this. This is a new endeavor. First time through doing a YouTube live. Did some Facebook lives back in the day. Spent a little bit of time. That was actually some things that helped build the audience for the podcast in a big way, doing those Facebook lives. So now I'm switching it up a little bit, making the move to YouTube and see if we can tap into the audience here a little bit. It's been a struggle for me. Everybody knows that. So that's kind of the purpose here, to kind of get a little bit of an exposure. What I thought I would do is showcase some cool footage for you to take a look at and talk about Thanksgiving a little bit, and Thanksgiving in the military, what it's like to be deployed in the military, what it's like to be deployed on Thanksgiving in the military, and what it is exactly that we're fighting for. There's some things going on in this country right now that are just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. I hate to be so general, but a lot of things to be very concerned about in terms of what the future of this country looks like. Um, how and why did we end up here doing this YouTube live tonight? Well, I was trying to break into the YouTube audience a little bit. Many of you heard me talk about the struggle doing that, and trying to find a way that I could engage the YouTube audience, and started doing the podcast live, or not live, but videotaping the podcast while I did it. And that got to be too time consuming. Just got to be a little too much to handle. And then somebody said, "Hey, you got to do a live. You're going to go out there on YouTube live, get yourself in front of the audience. People want to see you. People want to be able to interact with you." And that was kind of what the step was here, the big leap. But what's the big question that people are asking on Thanksgiving? What's the main thing people say? What are you thankful for on Thanksgiving? And asking a question like that, particularly on a podcast or on a video like this, just isn't normally something that I would do. It's not the natural me. Hey, what are you thankful for? I mean, I might ask my family, my kids. I think it's important to them, but not something I would typically ask, or typically be asked to respond to from the people in my inner circle. What are you thankful for? I'm thankful to be alive. All right? I'm thankful to be vertical. I'm thankful to have whiskey in the cabinet. Okay, the basic. No, not really. What is it this year that if I had to step back and say, what am I thankful for? Well, we made a move. We're in a new house, and there's a new studio here that has opened up a wealth of opportunities, such as doing what we're doing here today. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful, with everything going on, the position that I find myself in with my family, uh, where we're at in terms of being able to provide for ourselves, and take care of ourselves, and continue our own little quiet enjoyment in this world. And of course, I'm thankful for my family, and got to spend some time with them. My son, he's 21 years old. He's going to be leaving for the Air Force in April. I'm sorry, he just turned 22. Time goes fast. 22 years old, getting ready to go in the Air Force. He's going to be in pararescue, which, if you know anything about pararescue, is Air Force Special Forces. And we're super excited about seeing him take advantage of that opportunity and carry on the military legacy of the family. My father, both my parents, my mother and my father, served in the military. His grandfather on his mother's side served in Korea. Myself, a Marine combat veteran, and now he's going to do it in his own way. So this may be one of the last few times we get to have him home, at least for a little while. And yeah, like a lot of people, I would say that Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. I love it. Like, I like to eat. Who doesn't like to eat? I like to be around my family. I like to enjoy all those things. So I said that one of the things I wanted to do, in case you haven't been able to notice here from the footage that I've been able to display here, that I wanted to showcase a little bit the American military and talk about what it means to be in the military. Great stuff that I'm going to be able to show for you here. I know my big head is in the way, but this is the way we're able to view it, make it kind of larger than life. All these different things, all these different capabilities, the United States military. 1.3 million veterans have died defending this country. And I've made different analogies about this over the years. If they stood shoulder to shoulder, they'd span from Richmond, Virginia, all the way to New York City. Those are the men and women, the soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines, men and women that have died defending this country. Young men and women that believed in what the flag stood for, the Constitution, the law, the equal access, and what that meant. And about the same number, by the way, it's the same, our standing army, if you will, our American military is also about 1.3 million currently serving around the world in places that I don't even know how to pronounce, much less you know where they are. God-forsaken places in some cases. In some cases, very young. I was 17 years old uh, at the point that I joined the Marine Corps. 17 years old, 19 years old, I was in combat, deployed, a million miles away from home, standing our ground. You start to learn a lot about philosophy when you're staring down the barrel of a gun. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, the world takes on a little different perspective. Anyway, I appreciate you joining us tonight. I know a lot of people are going to be watching this on the replay. That's good. Like I said, it's the first time doing a live. And I'm going to take a little deep dive into a couple of things. I got a special guest who was kind enough to join me. He took this same oath that I did. Before I introduce him, I want to repeat this oath, and then maybe he'll talk about it a little bit with us. I, Christopher Scott, do solemnly swear. This is the same oath of enlistment that every sailor, airman, soldier, Marine takes before they ever step foot on their recruit depot, on their boot camp. I, Christopher Scott, do solemnly swear or affirm. I don't believe that was an option when I took it. It was either you swore or you didn't. I don't take oaths anymore. I believe that this was the one and only oath that I ever took in my life. I, Christopher Scott, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And here's the kicker in that. 4 little words. I'm surprised it's even legal today. So help me God. Butch Erskine. Some of you have heard me talk about Butch, my brother Butch, Air Force veteran, Butch Erskine, author of Hope for Survival, available at hopeforsurvival.com. Before we get into the whole book and what the book is about, do you remember taking the oath of enlistment, Butch?
I do.
How
Very,
old?
very, very, very clear. August 1982. And then I took it again in March the 2nd of 1983. I was put on a flight and sent to San Antonio, Texas to lose my hair, my name, and everything that I thought I once believed. And it was the smartest decision I ever made in my life. Truly, it was an absolute honor to serve our country and to serve the American people. And it's even still now, 17 years since I retired. At 20 years, it's very humbling to look back on all the different moments over the years in different places in the world. I think I had 7 or 8 Thanksgivings abroad. Guam, England, Saudi Arabia was my very first one. And my Thanksgiving meal was choice between a cheese sandwich and a peanut butter sandwich. We had just arrived into the location, so actually to have that to eat was pretty good. And the food was one thing, Chris, but it was being around other American military men and women and sharing stories from home, all walks of life, wearing the same uniform. We were all different, but we were there as one. And It was truly an honor.
I think definitely one thing you learn, serving in the military, at least in most cases, I'm sure it's not the case for everybody. Everybody's story is a little bit different. Their journey is a little bit different. But on some level, serving in the military, and I think you probably say this for even beyond just the American military, you learn what it means to sacrifice. You learn personal sacrifice.
Yeah.
And, it's a unique opportunity to learn that in a service environment. And I think you're right too. That element of brotherhood is
Yeah.
uh, something that such a strong connection, at least between certain veterans.
Yeah, it's like you and I kind of tease each other on the side, the Air Force, Marine Corps thing. But when you're deployed downrange, we all have different jobs, but we all have one goal. And it doesn't matter whether your uniform says Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, Navy. We're all one, you know,
Yes,
serving the
indeed, we are.
country, the flag, and the Constitution. And we have our marching orders, and our goal is for all to return.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the goal in a second. I'm going to come back to you, Butch. There, I want to talk about
Yep.
the book. I want to talk a little bit about preparation. I want to talk first, though, about what's in front of us a little bit. People ask me questions all the time, and then you definitely get to see patterns to the questions that people begin to ask. And I'm talking about people in my private life, people in my semi-private life, as well as the audience of the podcast, where people, they're going to say, what do you think is going to happen? Who do you think is going to win the election? And you hear me say it once, you heard me say it a million times. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't expect to have one anytime soon, quite frankly. But I do want to talk about a couple of things going on, and as I see it tying together, and I want to talk a little bit about um, thinking about where we stand on this, both individually and collectively. So, the first big issue going on that everybody's well aware of is this election and the question of the legitimacy of the election. Now, you've got a lot of people on the left, a lot of media focused on saying that message is nothing but some crazy conspiracy to overturn the election that rightfully Biden won. And then you got conservatives looking, I'm like, man, these numbers aren't adding up.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
math isn't working out here. But I don't think, and I want to stay very focused on what I perceive to be the issue, and I think that what I've been predicting on this has been correct. And um, you know, you need to understand. Look, my prediction was that Trump was going to win by likely a wide margin. I had zero expectation that Trump was going to that was going to come into question. I mean, you looked at and I know this. The right with the liberals would say, well, you stupid conservative, they'll judge it based on how many flags Trump is selling. They were selling Trump flags 100-1 over Biden.
Yeah.
And you say, well, what does that mean? It means nothing. But then he had 10 times more of a social media following. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means nothing. And you say that, well, he consumes 90% of the media. And you say, well, what does that mean? It's not an election. I say, it's true. It's not. But all of that is just a big distraction. And I got to tell you something, that I myself have gone back to school on the importance of what all this means, but I called it right and I called it early. And I said, the issue is an issue of due process. You cannot have a judge or a governor or whatever the case might be at whatever level of government, you cannot have them unilaterally making legislative decisions. You end up with a banana republic. And the fact of the matter is, this isn't hard to understand, that certain governors and others work to change the election laws without going through the proper process. And that due process is a fundamental part of the democratic part of our republic and the foundation of peace that existed within this society by design, because the founding fathers apparently knew what life was like without it.
Yeah.
And they said people have to have a way to air their grievances, have to have a fair system to have their arguments heard on the merits and a decision made. All of those components are important, and all of those components have been ignored by these totalitarian governors. Ironically enough, immaterial as the flags in the social media, ironically enough, the 5 swing states with Democratic governors and largely district attorneys funded by Soros in their major cities, ironically enough. Okay. I said to myself, I want to stay a little calmer on the videos. I don't want my blood. I want to be. I don't want to be the angry YouTube guy. I want to be the happy YouTube guy.
I think folks like the angry ones.
Look at this shot behind me. Is that not incredible? What do you think that is? Probably a C5 or something like. You would know, Butch. What is that?
Yeah, I'd say it's one of the heavies. C5, C17, maybe a 141.
That was about as clear as mine. There you go. What's that? Oh no, that's a self-propelled howitzer there, 155 millimeter. Our military has such incredible capabilities, which I was going to mention this point last. I want to mention it now with that as a backdrop. I don't know if you're hearing any of the stories about Iran and the potential arrest. So, you've got such a huge potential for unrest over the election, which I've called that as well. I talked about the election being a tipping point. Here we are, the tipping point being drug out. The consequences could be monumental. Iran now talking about war, the seemingly indication that they want to politically promote Trump into a war. And then UN Agenda 2030 is something that I wanted to throw into there. And you say, well, where did that come from? You're not hearing that in the news.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about when I say Agenda 2030, Butch?
Yeah,
Are you
actually,
familiar with it?
I've been tracking it since about 2010. It used to be Agenda 21, then it was Wilderness
Yep, they keep,
Corridor,
there's Agenda
and now it's
2050.
2030.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2015, as best as I can understand, our government surrendered, via a very puppet, purely, I don't know, figurative gesture, basically opted into this grand scheme of one world government.
Yeah.
Is that your understanding?
Yes. Yeah.
The
There's a
Obama
lot of,
administration said, yeah. So, and all of this information is plainly available on the web if you choose to go look for it. But make no mistake about it, nobody's going to make any effort to get the information into your hands, except for a couple of rogue YouTube idiots like myself. Right?
yeah. Keep in mind too, Chris, many of these agreements between the UN and the United States or whatever country, they're signed every year. So whether it was under Bush, under Clinton, under Obama, they are signed every single year. It's basically renewed. Or the agreement from the UN, under certain conditions in the United States, the UN will send peacekeepers into the United States to support our government. Maybe they see it from a different light than we do. But those agreements are signed on an annual basis. They're renewed.
No, I'm not. I could go on for an hour about the dangers, horrors, and problems with this. Besides the fact that, in my opinion, and I think most constitutional lawyers would agree, completely unconstitutional that our government would even entertain such an idea. The word that I have is simply this, and that's tyranny. Because the minute that we're going to begin to surrender our rights to somebody in where? In London, that's a whole nother story. But let me say this. I got to move on because I don't want to get tied up forever because you know me, I get to rambling and I'll go on this whole thing for
Before you take off rolling, when you get a second, let's talk about Iran for a minute.
go.
Iran. One important thing to remember about Iran is, the United States right now, President Trump is on the verge of pulling out the largest peace deal in the history of our country. Saudi Arabia is the single country right now that we're waiting. And once Saudi signs this peace agreement with Israel, there's about 33, 34 other Arab countries that are going to follow suit, with about 8 that have already signed, I believe. They are all Arab. Iran is 50% Persian. They're 50% Persian and 50% Arab. Okay. Iran is not part of that peace deal. Saudi Arabia and Israel both know Iran has to be dealt with, and the only hope of them being dealt with is between now and the departure of our current president. Because if by chance he rotates out of office, the incoming administration, they are pro-Iran. So a lot of the news you're hearing, there was an assassination of their top nuclear scientist in the last 5 days in Iran. Iran's threatening to build more of the centrifuges. This is where that's heating up at. The U.S. just sent B-52 bombers in the last 5
Yeah, and
days.
there's been assets moved into the
Yeah.
Gulf.
So
So, look, the bottom line, we go into a whole thing about that, and I'm not an expert on foreign affairs or Iran, but
yeah, nor I.
trouble on the horizon there.
Yeah.
You got trouble at home. You got big trouble at home. You got this crazy UN agenda that there's this massive political divide on here, right? And I don't think that part of the problem is most of the people are being fooled. Look, you don't hear anybody getting up publicly. Two things I'll say to you to think about. Not one politician has ever gotten up and said, and this would be on the Democratic side for the most part, it wouldn't be Republicans, but not one has gotten up and said, "Oh, I support and promote UN Agenda 2030." They're not putting it out there like that.
Right.
Nobody's saying that. And let me tell you what UN Agenda 2030 includes. You're not getting that. At the same time, you're never getting a liberal politician saying, "I want to be clear, I support and defend the Constitution," which they all took an oath to do this, a similar oath to what we took. I guess the difference is in terms of how much that oath gets bought and sold for. And that's a problem for both parties. But let me just move on here. I don't want to be on a rant. I want to keep, because there's stuff I want to get to. We're in too late, right? I know. Strange times. Look, we got a big debt issue. All right. Big issue around the world, not limited to the United States. Information monitoring and tracking of citizens that's never gone on before, as best I can tell, in the history of humanity. The amount of data collection, and it's 4 big tech companies that are doing that by and large. Add to that, you've got this unrest, which is the same stuff going on around the world. There was a protest in Portland over the weekend. You say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what are they protesting? They got their president, right? Then there was a big protest in London, and the police reaction was very strange to all that. Patterns. I'm giving you quick cliff notes of all that. And then you've got these roaming shutdowns. All of this, I want to say to you, and some of you are going to just laugh at me saying this, that I remember being predicted by, and I'm sure there were others, but the guy that I remember predicting all this was Glenn Beck, back when he was on
Yes.
Fox News. And he was
Yes.
ostracized, whatever the words I'm looking for there. It's getting late here on this Sunday night. They laughed him out of town, but you know what? He was right about it.
Yep.
He was right about it. I want to show you something real quick. Let's see. This is us. That's not what I want. Okay, this is what I wanted. Are you seeing that there, that image of that
Yes,
street corner? I don't
yes.
think I can play the video because you get into some copyright infringement stuff. This is downtown LA, highlighting this whole video goes through and there let me stop that because I don't want to get into any copyright issues. I don't know what the rules are on if you do a screen share of a video, or I was like, I could do a screen share with a Kindle book that I bought and read it to you. Am I in violation of copyright laws in doing that? I believe that I am. So I want to be respectful of everybody's copyright, but hopefully you got a little glimmage, a little glimmage, a little image, a little glimpse of an image inside of LA. What, the second biggest, whatever it is, huge American city. And what do you see? You see the results of the most progressive city, at least in the United States. How many times do we keep banging our head against the wall and say that this isn't working? And they say, well, it's the uniqueness of the problems. I don't know what to say about that. I say it's failed progressive ideology that runs contrary to human nature. Let me ask you something, and before I get into the preparation side, Butch, this is from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, meaning assumed to be true, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator. That's assuming, making the assumption that there is a creator. That's a matter of debate today. That's a problem right out of the gate, a big problem, as it turns out, because with certain unalienable rights cannot be possible if it's not endowed by their creator, some authority beyond man, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Does any of that apply today? I don't know. I talked about due process earlier. These are fundamentals of government that were once thought and respected to be the ideals of freedom around the world. What's happened to them today? Balance of powers. Even the most noble kings will become tyrants if their reign is unchecked, just as democracy will degrade into mob rule if there are no constraints on popular power. A just government must be founded on a system of checks and balances. Liberals have sought to cast that aside and infiltrate every level of our government, every arm of our government, the judicial branch, the education system, local governments, state governments, mayors, district attorneys. Of course, they have the right to run for these positions. And another basic fundamental was that that leaders should be of exceptional character and integrity. Those who would govern a country must possess great courage, ability, and resolve. True leaders always put the interest of their nation above their own. And I find it hard to believe that politicians that are getting $70 million book deals and their children are getting $3.5 million from Russia, I find it really hard to believe that they've put the interest of the country above their own. So we're living in chaotic times. And I want to mention this book, and I'm going to give you a little piece of it, and then we're going to talk to the author here, one of my personal heroes. And the book is Hope for Survival. You can get that at hopeforsurvival.com. I want to read something key to it. I'm making a lot of noise here. Let me settle down. This was very moving for me, this piece of the book. And I could boil it down to 2 words, but let me give you the paragraph first. Few rarely consider they are 9 meals away, 9 meals away from beginning of starvation. There is a national mindset that the government will come in and rescue and save the day. Then when that doesn't happen, it's because the president in office is a racist or hates a particular race or socioeconomic class. How about a greater insult to the ego? You are not a high priority to the government. And the bottom line is this: self-reliance. And I want to talk more about that. But before I do, Butch Erskine, author of Hope for Survival, creator of the movement, really, in a way. Butch, why is it why is it so important to take this seriously, and why now?
Well, I believe it's equally important every day that you're alive because it's your life. Or do you want to be in control of your life and the life of your family, or do you want to be dependent upon a system that we can set and cover all the ways that the system has failed miserably and failed people miserably? So, my whole philosophy is be responsible, take out insurance on yourself and your family, and that's through food, water, shelter, security, and some of the other items that you and I have talked about. And it's noted in the book. When when the system goes away, whether it's I mean, just in the last 6 weeks, everyone was waiting for the election to happen. They're all looking at Washington D.C., and here come hurricane, I think it was Zeta, across the Gulf Coast. The remnants came inland, came back across Alabama and Georgia and North Carolina. Folks were knocked out 7 to 10 days without power, and some without water, and some without phone. So that's my whole point. You may lose your job, you may have a natural disaster, you may have an injury. You can't predict it. Self-reliance will help you ensure that you can feed your family and take care of your family, whether it's on a small scale, local scale, regional scale. And it all starts with your mindset, you know.
Well, I'll tell you a
uh,
couple
uh,
of things. I gotta tell you a couple of things, Butch. Number one, I think there's a moral obligation for people to prepare on a number of different fronts. Obviously, I think what you're referring to, the moral obligation to yourself to be able to provide for yourself, as opposed to being so willing to be independent on others necessarily. But I think it goes a little bit further than that. It's just like this talk of wear a mask to protect others. Well, stock up on food that you don't become a burden to that
right.
19-year-old National Guardsman or whoever it is that's got to wade through 6 feet of water, or whatever the case might present itself to be, to get you the help that you need. And I think there's an obligation to the community, and as we are capable and as we are able, we should come to support this greater good in times of need. And that boils down to this question of to prepare or not. And one of the simple things I would say on this, in trying to change people's habits a little bit, or encourage people to change their habits a little bit, and that is just, when you buy a little bit more each time, and you begin
Yeah.
the natural process of adding. But it goes a lot further than that. And I'm not talking about soup and canned goods here as the
Yeah.
answer to everything, because and you and I've had got into some deep discussions about this. Like I've recognized that here where I'm at in lower south eastern Pennsylvania, our biggest point of risk is arguably water, which is arguably everybody's point of risk. But in certain times of the year, under certain weather conditions, our biggest issue here is loss of heat.
Yeah.
That problem could very quickly parlay itself into a series of other problems. And so, in reading your book, and in reading that issue of self-reliance, and then we, as you know, and I'll tell the story here, it's not a long story, but what ended up happening shortly after we moved, we lost power, I think, for 48 hours or something like that. We had just moved in. We didn't have the furniture set up. We were going through, doing some changes to the house and whatnot. And just got food in the refrigerator, lost it all. We had nothing. The heat went out. We're on a well. We lost our well. So we got no power, no heat, no well. And, fortunately, conditions weren't dangerous. But let me tell you, when the house goes silent and you start looking around, you're like, what do I have? It's a real eye opener.
Yeah.
Time starts ticking pretty darn quick in that scenario. So, well, Butch, let me ask you something. The election is over. I talked about tipping point, the election being the tipping point, the possibility of that dipping into a civil war, but it hasn't. Everything's okay right now. Everybody had a nice Thanksgiving. COVID's up a little bit. Why do I need to be bothered with this now?
With the election or with preparedness?
With preparedness, why would I want to set my why should I even entertain this as a topic?
Because because if you buy into it, it's a mindset. It's something that you should be doing every day. It doesn't mean you have to buy something, you know, but based on what's happening around you in your 5 mile radius, and especially up where you are, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, you got some key players waiting on an outcome of an election. You've got winter coming up here real
Right.
soon. You're going to be seeing snow if you haven't already.
All right.
But you should be looking at the status of what you have in your plans. You got multiple potential threats around you that could impact your way of your daily life, especially with a young kid.
Yeah.
So you're looking out for, you and your wife, but your young child as well. So all these factors you've got to continually monitor and know how to adapt. Maybe it's kind of like in the military, you may have a threat out there, but what's between you and that threat? And you've got to recognize it. You got to adapt to it. But one of the key things in preparedness, Chris, is flexibility. You know, um, like the Hurricane Zeta and the election. You're waiting on an election and you lose your power for a week. You got to have flexibility. You know,
Well, like we used
adapt
to
and
say in the
over
say in,
adapt and
say in the
overcome.
used to say in the
You
Marine
know,
Corps, semper gumby, always be flexible.
yeah. So and where things that here's one of the concerns that I have. We're working over at Hope for Survival and so forth. We're working every day to try to help folks, all walks of life, and to be prepared for whatever it may be, the unknown, right? And one of the concerns that I really have right now in our country is I was down in the wife and I drove down to North Georgia a few weeks ago to do all day classes at a church and then do some other work. More and more small communities are closing. The mom and pop shops, the stores, the restaurants, the little corner marts, they're boarded up. They're not coming back, right? But these are our people. No matter who they are, they've been knocked down, and they're going to need people to help pick them up. And that's where I think that we, as American loving patriots and people of faith, I think that we have a responsibility to also be prepared to do what we can to the best that we can, especially with winter coming up. I mean, it was sad to go through these communities. It was an eye opener for me, having been to Haiti and some of these other third world countries. And it's like, this is home. These are our people. I don't know them, but they're our people. And if we go through another round of COVID, uh, it's going to be harder and harder for these people to survive, Chris. You know,
Well, I believe it's going to be.
and go ahead.
I think that a lot of veterans are going through a great moral conflict right now on a number of different fronts, and
I agree.
there's a question about what are our obligations, and what should we be doing, what shouldn't we be doing. Not really a question that I don't hear come up every day from a veteran that I know. It's just the same feeling of this bit of a urgency to act. But the main thing that I wanted to bring up was this book, Hope for Survival. I got to tell you, Butch, you talked about changing the mindset, and you've changed my mindset on this. And it's funny listening to you talk as the situation evolves. Like, I had a plan going into the election, and I had a plan that if I saw certain things, if I saw X, I was going to do Y. I didn't have to do those things. Now I'm watching for a different set of X, and if I see that, then I'm gonna respond in Y. But anyway, it has changed my mindset. Uh, the proceeds from the book, or the profits from the book. First of all, I have no business relationship with Butch. I don't make any money on this. I don't want any money from it. Are you taking all the money? What do you donate? You're donating a portion of this, right?
Yeah, we pay the print cost from each book sale. We pay the print cost, and then 100% of the remaining. It's about 750 a book roughly, is donated to charity, and it's donated to a food kitchen here in East Tennessee,
Wow.
where we're at while we telework. Um, yeah, so actually, book sales have been tremendous this second half of the year this year, and um, we've, like I said, $7 roughly per book, and we've put about $800 into the food bank since October,
Awesome. Well,
and
listen, point the
that's a
point.
lot of food for hungry people.
It's good. It's good. It's awesome to be able to help out. And I want to make sure everybody understands this is, I'm not trying, this wasn't like a, whatever we're at, 42-minute book pitch. It's not what this is about. If you're interested in, protecting your future, possibly near future, and your families, I highly recommend it. Do as you may. That's your option there. But anyway, Butch, thanks so much. Um, one of the things I want to just mention, a couple things before we sign off here shortly, and a couple things I want to put in front of you. But I've been thinking a lot about the direction of the podcast, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit on tomorrow's podcast, which is going to be posted here in just a few hours. And trying to figure out, where I wanted to go with it, what I wanted the message to be, and the message that I want to be is consistent with what's in common sense, among other things. Among other things, it's not just limited to this, but you know, common sense was written at a time when this country was immersed in incredible conflict. The Revolutionary War was as much a civil war as it was a revolutionary war. A lot of people don't realize that. Most people did not want independence from Britain. They thought it was scary. They wanted to maintain that attachment to Britain. And at the time that the second edition of Common Sense was written, the Revolutionary War had already begun. The Declaration of Independence had already been signed. And then comes along this book, this pamphlet, making the case for freedom. And you say, why would that be necessary if the Declaration of Independence had already been signed and the Revolutionary War was well underway? Because people weren't supporting it. It wasn't popular. Freedom in America was not popular at that time, of all things. All this patriotic, fluffy stuff you want to see, hear, and believe. It was like this radical minority that changed the idea of freedom for people around the world. And it was slipping. And Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, which was, I think, undeniably at this point, the single biggest, uh, most convincing call to freedom ever made. Ever made. And I think that there's a need for it today as much as ever. I rewrote it in modern English. I think it's the best way to read it. I think it'd make a great Christmas gift. I think, listen, this was the call to freedom. And I'm telling you to put it out as a gift, to get it in people's hands and say, hey, this might be a message worth spreading, believe it or not. And in the meantime, all of the money that I make from the book sales, the Audible sales have been through the roof. Thank you. All that money is going to the Trump legal defense, legal campaign, whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't normally get behind something like that, but I think the time is dire that the integrity of this election be maintained, and I'm going to do my small part. Anything that is made from book sales in December will go to that. So check it out if you get a chance. Common Sense. Go to ChristopherScottShow.com. Everything I'm showing you, you can see at ChristopherScottShow.com. The Hope for Survival link. If you click on books, my books are all there. But I want to mention this one also, Forgotten and Abandoned, an Average Joe Story. I'll just say this, since we've been yapping a while here. It's written by a young conservative, and it will reignite your passion for America. Forgotten and Abandoned. Go to ChristopherScottShow.com. I feel like I'm on QVC here. I feel like I'm a QVC salesperson. All these great books for the low price. Go to ChristopherScottShow.com if you want to check it out. Butch, I think you'll agree with me. I think that the basic fight right now is that we make sure that we have a fair election, and trying to get in front of people and get people to understand this issue. You mentioned this issue of you can't depend on the government to come save you. And I think the Trump supporters have the same problem, that they keep waiting for that Trump's going to come in and save the day. Maybe he will, and that'll be great. But at the end of the day, I think we got to come back to ourselves and say, you know what are we involved in? What are we doing? What are we not doing? How do we change this? But anyway, thanks, Butch, for jumping on here. I really appreciate it. It's good to have you.
Absolutely, Chris. If I may, we're in a really tough position right now. We were as a nation, as patriots, veterans. I know a lot of men and women patriots who are not veterans who are willing to stand and die for our country and for the cause of our Constitution and Bill of Rights at all ages. And the thing, it's like if tomorrow morning the president goes out on the balcony and says, "I'm calling all patriots to Washington, D.C., where do you stand?" And it's something an individual can only answer. The questions are asked also, but like you and I were discussing before we started tonight, we have to allow the process to play out the way the system's designed, whether it is in our favor or not in our favor, or it appears corrupt. We still have to let those steps play out before we show our hand. But at the same token, we're watching this from a national level in politics of who's going to be our next leader. But we also have to ensure at home we're taking care of our family. There's so many unknowns of if we have a new administration coming up. Agenda 2030. Are you going to take the vaccine? There's another wave of COVID coming. There's higher taxes coming. How's it going to affect new skills because of all the new AI and the virtual reality technology that's replacing man with the robotics? All these things are coming up. How is it going to affect your household? You may not know yet, but it's things that you really need to, on your own, start researching and reading about, and stop waiting on Washington to tell you what's going to happen next. Okay. As leaders of your home, you have got to prepare your family and start becoming versatile and knowing what potentially may come at you.
Couldn't be more true. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
You may not know. What if we lose the internet tomorrow? And now you have to make decisions on your own based on everything you knew up until midnight tonight.
Well, it's like I said, we experienced that a little bit when the power went out and the house goes
Absolutely.
quiet. We lost everything here. What are you left with? And it's I'm not a, a doomsdayer. I tend to be mostly optimistic, but
Yeah.
I think, like you said, that there's a certain responsibility to look at what's going on with some level of accuracy.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Be in control.
yeah. Not I'm not saying optimistically or pessimistically, but realistically, looking at what you see in front of you right now and saying, "Hey, something has to be done."
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, it's a late Sunday night. Butch, thanks so much. It was great to have you. Thanks everybody who joined us tonight. It was really great to have you, and I hope you'll check out the book, Hope for Survival, hopeforsurvival.com.